All right, it seems that we have some technical difficulties here. No problem. I heard from the back office that we are already live. So then I will start. Hello and welcome to our asset tracking webinar today. My name is Maxime Bernier and I will guide you through today's webinar. And I'm very excited to have you all here because today we will talk about how you can track assets along your supply chain. And before we begin, I would like to give you some, let's say, organizational information. First of all, the virtual room we are all in. Please note that our participants are automatically muted to avoid any background noise. The speakers of today are visible in the media player on the very left-hand side, and you will see all slides in the center of your screen. We have also some engagement options for you. For example, we have a resource list with lots of complementary content, like, for example, our latest asset tracking guide or our slides for you to download. We have also the opportunity for, let's say, Q&A. Therefore, we have a dedicated Q&A window for questions anytime during the webinar. We have also the option to make an appointment with us to address your individual questions or have a look at your project or get a product demo from us if necessary. Maybe also a hint on that side, all windows which you can see in your screen are widgets, meaning they can be minimized or maximized. Please note that we record this webinar and we will publish our recordings and share them with you via email directly after the webinar. Feel free to share the recordings if you want with, for example, colleagues or friends by just using the share button in your menu. All right, enough said about the organizational part. Now it's time to introduce you today's speakers, and therefore I would like to hand over to my colleague Markus Schulze.
Yeah, welcome. My name is Markus Schulze and I've been working with Trumpf since 2014 in different positions. By now I'm in charge for the transportation management, where we establish a logistics control tower for the whole Trumpf group. As of 2017, I am the so-called SPOC, so the single point of contact for the Bosch group and for all persons at Trumpf concerning questions about the Bosch track and trace. But on this later more. And now I would like to hand over to Jutta.
Thanks, Markus, and a warm welcome as well from my side. My name is Jutta Marie Kühne, and I'm the product owner of the Bosch-owned tracking solution. So you can already imagine I'm working for Bosch since 2.5 years. And before I had a long time experience with asset tracking and as well with the digitalization of supply chains in general. And my question in the past was always, can we get rid of all these counting, searching, and calling efforts? Do we need to do always these inventory counts all the day? Do we need to go out on bad weather to count assets and to find where are my load carriers? And I can tell you already upfront to the meeting and to the webinar here today, yes, it's possible. And how it works and what else can be done to digitalize your supply chain and to make use of the asset informations you are all having on hand. This will be presented today by Maxime Bernier and as well by Markus Schulze from Trumpf. I wish you for the next 45 minutes all the best and enjoy the time learning new things, and hopefully you are convinced in the end of the day as well that the past is the past and the future will be different. Have fun and enjoy the time. We will hear each other later on when it comes to the product of track and trace and as well the Q&A session afterwards. And I'm handing over now back to Max, who is your host of today's call.
Yes, thank you very much, Markus and Jutta. And to get things started, I would like to show you just, let's say, the rough agenda for today. In the first 2 points of the agenda, we will cover, let's say, a smooth introduction into the topic of asset tracking, clarify, let's say, some fundamental things which needs to be considered when we talk about asset tracking. And in part 3, this is, from my point of view, the most important one. We will learn from a practical example from Markus Schulze how things are going in practice with the topic track and trace. Last point will be a short Q&A section. So again, feel free to hand in your questions beforwards that we can have a Q&A session at the end. All right, so let's start with the very first agenda point. And before we dig deeper into the topic of asset tracking as such, I think it's time to clarify or define the term asset tracking. And with a look on that slide here, you can see that there are different kind of logistical assets are displayed, which can be distinguished based on the industry they are applied in. But to put things simple, I think we can agree that we predominantly see here load carriers. Yeah? And load carriers, this is exactly the scope for today's webinar. So whenever we talk about asset tracking, we talk about tracking of logistical load carriers because they are a fundamental part, within the journey of a digitized supply chain. And this is the point of time where we would be really keen to know with what kind of audience we have to deal with today. So therefore, I kindly ask you to participate on our poll, which should now pop up in your screen, and just give us an idea what kind of assets you have in your business today. Here's the question already displayed. So the question is, which assets would you like to track? We have made some options here. We have the opportunity of load carriers, more in the air freight space, but also locomotive or let's say railway wagons, trucks, construction machinery, and so on and so forth. Maybe some information on that one. If you don't see your load carrier here in that list, feel free to click others and give us a short hint in the again, Q&A section with what kind of load carriers you are dealing in your business. And we will get back to the results of the poll in just a couple of slides. All right, so after clarifying, let's say, the fundamentals, I think it's time to dig a little bit deeper into the topic, what kind of parameters you could consider when it comes to a potential asset tracking project. And as you can see, we also listed here a couple of things which are, let's say, very common in practice, but I don't want to go through all of those options here. I just want to highlight the first three of those. And I would like to start with the geolocation as a first point. And I think the geolocation is that kind of parameter the great majority associates with the term asset tracking, and this is okay. But what's even more important in that regard is what kind of value or added value can you derive from having the geolocation data at hand? And I would like to give you just a quick example and take you into the rail industry. Because in the rail industry, it is very common to track the geolocation, for example, of a locomotive or also of a wagon, and map this information, this data, with the geolocation of the closest workshop. The target here is, I think that's quite obvious, to, let's say, have the best route at hand for the locomotive and the workshop, because the maintenance process, which needs to be optimized in that use case, is still a manual task which needs to be done, meaning the locomotive needs to go physically in the workshop. And therefore, let's say optimizing the route is here the goal by having the geolocation data at hand. Next point in that role would be the whole topic of incoming and outgoing goods area, which is also still in practice a manual task. Lots of the time there is somebody who needs to scan or book something manually when it comes in, as well if it goes out. And with the right tracking solution at hand, this is also a field where you could automate this whole process, because as you can imagine, this is a field where we have a lot of error prone, because of manual tasks. And with the right tracking solution, you would be able to automate that process and get also a holistic view of your inventory. Last point would be the condition. So in that particular case, is a potential asset, a potential load carrier free or occupied at the moment? And this is a really important information, especially for the coordination as well as the dispositioning of load carriers within the supply chain, but also in conjunction, for example, with suppliers and customers. So this is really important. All right, I hear from our back office that we already have our results, which I would like to show you right now. So I will just guide you through those results right here. So what we have, okay, we have roughly 20% which are dealing with load carriers, not so much in the air freight space. Oh, okay, a lot of sea freight containers with 15%, trucks also, this is really interesting, and others also 26%. Okay, so I have to say this is something which I expected, but especially the others field would be a field where I would really be interested in what kind of other load carriers you are dealing with. So again, please let us know in the Q&A section. Okay, after talking about, let's say, general things, also different kind of parameters you can take under consideration, I think it's now time to get the technology discussion going. And whoever already dealt with the question, what kind of tracking technology we have at the moment at the market available, truly recognized, I guess, that there are a lot of different options out there. And for those of you who didn't, I would like to just mention the very common solutions which are available at the market very briefly. And I would like to start on the left-hand side with the data logger. So the data logger is a physical device which is equipped with different kind of sensors to measure different kind of parameters. Could be the geolocation, could be the temperature or the humidity. And the device is measuring this data and also saving the data at the same time on a built-in computer chip. So the device is saving the data on the device as such. This is really important to know because the device is normally, or let's say on a regular basis, not advertising in an outbound mode at all. Meaning this is also the reason why this device is, or let's say a field of application of this device is most of the time air freight, because the logistics experts of you know that this is a field where we need to deal with different kind of special requirements, for example, airline approvals or certificates for hardware. So, and to avoid all of these, let's say, things, a data logger would be a good choice for having, let's say, the air freights covered from a logging point of view. Next example, and this is, let's say, in the center here of the slide, is the gateway sensor combination. So what does that mean? So in that case, we have a sensor tag, which is here displayed in blue. That's the smaller one, which is, again, measuring different kind of environmental parameters. Could be the geolocation, for example. And this sensor is sending this information via a specific protocol, for example, Bluetooth Low Energy, to a telemetry gateway. This is the, let's say, bigger device in the picture on the right side in dark blue. And the telemetry gateway is receiving the data, processing the data, and forwarding the data into a backend. And this backend could be in the cloud, for example, as a standalone solution, but could be also, let's say, a legacy system, for example, an SAP system or an ERP system, to store the data there and do some, let's say, additional data manipulation tasks, analysis, and reports. Maybe also for the sake of completeness, what kind of field of application do we have here in that kind of example? It's really common to have such kind of gateway sensor combination in the automotive industry, because you can imagine that there the OEMs are dealing with huge amounts of load carriers, and they are equipping those load carriers with such sensor tags and placing such telemetry gateways on, let's say, critical points within their supply chain, or let's call it in another way, on critical milestones within their supply chain. And whenever a load carrier which is equipped with such a gateway, such a sensor tag is passing by a gateway, the gateway receives a ping and forwards it to the backend, let's say, for a holistic view of the dispositioning of the load carrier. All right, last but not least, the very right-hand side, and I think this is obvious, we have also a lot of all-in-one devices available at the market, which are, let's say, including or involving all the before-mentioned functionalities in one device. I think it's also quite obvious that this kind of solution is most of the time the most expensive one, and there are, from my point of view, not so many use cases in the field which are there for such kind of a device. But we can get to that if you want in the Q&A session. Maybe some additional information regarding, let's say, the completeness of a solution. No matter what kind of technology you are choosing, you have to be always also aware of, let's say, the infrastructure which you are going to use to process the data from A to B. And in this case, this could be, for example, GSM, let's say as a telecommunication protocol, or also Sigfox or LoRaWAN networks. So this is really special, but also depending on your use case, depending on the coverage which you would like to, let's say, reach, this is definitely a point where you should have in mind. All right, so enough said about the technology. I would like to now to emphasize a little bit the challenges, which comes with the technology choice in that regard. Meaning the problem, the business problem, should be at the very center of your thoughts and considerations when you are dealing with the asset tracking topic. Meaning you should clarify what is your problem, what is, let's say, the root cause of the problem, and also what is the impact of the problem, which is the problem causing on your business processes. And that's, let's say, the point where you should go in with the right technology. And I know, and we know, that this is a really tough one. This is a really tough question. And therefore, we compiled that already mentioned at the beginning asset tracking guide with our expertise, based on our projects in the past and running projects, which should help you with, let's say, thoughts and important questions you should ask yourself in guiding you and leading you towards the right technology choice. So I just can say, please feel free to download the asset tracking guide. It helps very much in the discussion of the technology. All right, for the sake of completeness, I want to point out, let's say, the challenges and problem parts. As you can see here, we displayed here some saving, which are, let's say, in direct reliance to problems which could be solved in a tracking project. And I want to just, let's say, summarize and highlight the most important challenges which are out there at the moment in regards to load carriers and asset tracking. And I mentioned it before, we have that big topic of the high scan and booking efforts, especially in the ingoing and outgoing goods area. And I want to highlight again that this is still manual. This is still time consuming. We have a high effort, or let's say high personal effort to do this task. And we have also a field here which is where we have a lack of, or where we have lots of error prone, which needs to be considered. That's the one point. The second point is the lack of transparency regarding the whole, let's say, inventory management topic. So again, we have in practice a lot of problems who are dealing with no holistic view, on my inventory based on different kind of locations, for example. We have manual counting efforts, to make sure what do we have actually in stock when it comes to load carriers. And what goes hand in hand with this problem is also, let's say, unnecessary purchasing of new load carriers, because we are not aware that we maybe have in this and that location already a couple of free, which are not occupied, but we have no view, and therefore we are just, doing the easy way and purchasing some new one. Last but not least, I want to point out that there are also search and coordination efforts within a supply chain, which are in regard or reliance to load carriers. But this is something especially Markus Schulze will talk about later on, so I will leave it with that, and will now hand over for the product part, because we would like to show you, in addition, how we from Bosch are, let's say, tackling those issues. And therefore, I would like hand over right now to my colleague, Jutta Kühne.
Thanks, Max. And just to make it here right clear from the beginning, we are not using this technology we are showing you here today only for internal usage. We have as well a lot of external customers who are using already the Bosch track and trace solution since years. One of these companies is Rumpf. And Rumpf will show you later on how this works in their supply chain, how they bring end-to-end visibility into their supply chain by using the asset tracking technology of Bosch. But coming to the point, Markus will show you later how it operationally works, and I just give you a short rough idea how this theoretically works, or what is the technique behind that. We as Bosch have decided to go for a two-piece technology. That means we are using these gateway sensor combination for our customers, due to the fact that we ask upfront our customers, what are your pains? Max just mentioned about the problem. So we ask the customer, what are your pain points, and what would you like to gain with a tracking solution? And the clear answer was, I would like to have a tracking solution like an IoT solution, because it means, IoT always means it came from personal usage into the industry usage. In this case, we have chosen all technologies in this setup, which everybody of you knows already. So we have chosen Bluetooth, which you know from your combination of connecting your smartphone with your car. We have chosen the technologies of a smartphone for the gateway, so that it gets directly connected via your SIM card into a cloud. So all these things you are aware of. And the third thing, customers were asking us, can you please do us a favor? Can you please have a technology where I don't need a big IT implementation project, because it takes very long to get IT resources on board. And this is what we have done. We have chosen technology which can be plug and play implemented without any IT support, and you plug it in and you start tracking, and you get full transparency into your supply chain. And it's not wording, it's really realistic. And Markus will show you later on how they do it. And I just show you now from a product point of view how this looks like. So you have these gateways and sensor combination I'm showing you here in the picture. And you just add these sensors to your assets you would like to track. If the asset is a sea freight container, you can as well add these gateways directly to your assets, or if it's coming from the big assets like trailers, you can add as well the gateways directly for tracking the trailers. We have as well solar panels which you can add so that they get directly charged via solar panels, and you have full transparency about your trailers, full transparency about your assets from the moment you are adding the hardware to your asset. You can as well do material tracking with this solution, and at the end of the day, you just open a website and you have all the data available from the moment you have added the hardware to your assets. And I can tell you how this works from a product point of view within Bosch, but I think best would be if Markus tells you now more how they are doing this in Trumpf and what they have gained with the solution as benefits in their end-to-end supply chain, bringing visibility into the supply chain and having value added for the company itself.
Yeah, thanks, Jutta. I would like to start with just some words about Trumpf. Trumpf is an international high-tech company with more than 14,000 employees working for all over the world. We do have two major divisions. On the one hand side, the laser technology, where we assemble our own lasers and laser systems for laser cutting, laser welding, surface finishing and marking. And on the other side, we do have our machine tools for the flexible sheet metal processing. We have more than 22 international production sites all over the world, and these production sites are forming our global production network. This is really necessary to know because these production sites are in a supply relationship together. I will show you in the case I brought with me. I mentioned in my intro that I am the so-called SPOC, so the single point of contact, which means that all inquiries about possible use cases and implementation procedures lands on my desk. So the typical use case is, or a classic one, is that a dispatcher requires new containers, assets, or trolleys because it says we don't have enough in our supply chain. But the cost center manager declines the invest because he says there's no reason for more assets because last 2 or 3 weeks there have been enough and there was no increase of the production volume. So go out and find your assets. And that's where I come in place because our Trumpf dispatchers know by now that I do have technology for track and trace, and this is where a normal use case starts. So I have here with me our 5-step approach where we deal with, or where I deal with, to get a use case started. So the first one is understand the problem. What's the problem about? The second one is bring the participants on board. The third one is install the hardware, and then we can start tracking and finding our assets in the cloud. And the fifth one, pretty interesting, you can start working with data. So let's jump in. The use case, the specific one, and this one is about the picture you have seen. It's about our switch cabinets, and all started with a production shift. And this production shift resulted in a quite intransparency about how many assets do we have and what does the new supply chain look like, and do we have enough, really enough assets in that new supply chain? So the dispatcher came to me and asked for the track and trace technology, and I started to get familiar with the assets at all. So what are the dimensions? What's the surface? Pretty interesting. What's the number of the load carriers, the number of the assets we have in place by now, and also for the controllers, what's the value of an asset? So after this was clear, I started to ask for the process chain. So what does the supply chain look like, the new one? So we do have one external supplier, and he brings the assets via hub in the southwest of Germany to Far East to Poland. And Poland, we do have an internal supplier, and this one brings the material to the hub in the Far East Germany, to our receiving plant. This is one receiving plant, but we do also have a second receiving plant in Switzerland. And this material flow goes from Poland to the hub in West Germany, down south to Switzerland. So this is really important to know what the material flow looks like, because we have to find out who are our internal but also our external partners. What are the participants and our partners in the supply chain? So with this information, we go to our step 2. So this means bring our participants and partners on board. So what I normally do is I start to create a problem awareness, and we talk about our targets, our goals, and like Max said, it's about reduction of searching and coordination times, but it's also to avoid losses and new purchasings for new assets. And so this is all about the problem awareness we have to start with. On the other side, I normally explain the technology and the hardware like Jutta did before, but we also talk about the internal material flow in the supplier parts and the supplier sites, because we have to know, like Max said before too, we have to get familiar with the critical milestones which are logistic relevant. So after this is clear, everything is ready for like on-site visit. And for the on-site visit, what we are doing there is we are installing the hardware. And this is quite easy because we have the analyzation done before. We know our critical logistic milestones, so we do know how many gateways we need. In step 1, we ask for the number of assets, so we do know the number of the sensors we need. And with this information, we can start the installation. And the installation is really a piece of cake, because you do have the gateways, you do have big magnets, and you just take your power plug, put it together, bring it on a socket, and that's it. It's so easy, like Jutta said before, nothing else to do, just put it in a socket, that's it, nothing else. And you can do this like we did with our LSP. So we asked our LSP to get these gateways on the trailers, and he did so. So we joined and we gained quite more visibility in our supply chain. So what else is missing? We have to get the sensors at our assets. And this is quite easy because Bosch provides lots of different mounting systems you can work for, just ask them. And you just have to deal with like the Bosch app. So this is pretty cool too. You just scan the sensor, you scan the sensor, scan your asset, done. So all of the hardware installation is done that simple and that easy and that fast. So before we jump into the cloud, one really important step is still missing. It's all about the training of the users, how to work with the cloud. And therefore I created a one-pager, and with every new internal customer I deal with, I give them the one-pager and tell them and train them on how to use the cloud. And this is where I would like to take you with me. So let's jump in the cloud, in the live system, and I share with you some real data, some real insights, how we deal, or how the dispatcher in special deals with his use case. So we do have, and I think by now you should see my screen. You do have a searching field over here. In this field, the dispatcher can add like the number of the asset, or he can also just go for the name of the asset, and if he looks for one specific, he can just add the number of the asset he is looking for. So this is pretty cool too. As mentioned, you have the name, you have your asset type. You know in live, or you can see in live, at which location your asset is by now. And for this, I normally recommend like a self-explanation name. So that's pretty easy to find out where the asset is by now. You have the last update. So you see when the asset was seen at last time. So this is on the table, but what's also pretty cool is that you have an overview map. So if on one location, like an asset is missing, the dispatcher has the chance to get an overall overview. And here you can see that we do have more than 20 assets in Warsaw, in Poland. We do have like 20 or 19 in Switzerland. One is in our Eastern Germany plant. And just zoom a little bit in. We do have 40 assets at our supplier and 23 at our hub in Stuttgart. So this gives you a real-time overview of where your assets are right now. But sometimes it happens that assets get lost, and therefore you have a kind of type of alerting where you can figurate your own alerting. So just go into the configuration, into the alerting setup, just choose your asset you want to configure it, and over here you can see that you have two different types of alertings. You have kind of pre-alerting, which the dispatcher chooses like 5 days, and you do have a hard alerting after, in that case, the dispatcher gets the information that his asset gets lost. So this information brings us to our fifth step, like working with data. And in that case, or by now here, Bosch provides some reports, and I would like to show you just two. On the one hand side, it's the loss report, where you can have quite a good overview of your lost assets. There are quite many data. That's the reason why it chooses a little bit long for loading. And over here you can see this is our, just let me look here, this is our asset we are talking about right now. And in that particular case, the lost area where most of the assets got lost is the supplier at the plant. So I would guess that maybe some of the internal material flow changed. So we have to go to our supplier and ask, does something change? Do we have to place the gateway on another place, or do we need one more gateway? So this is quite cool to investigate where your lost assets are. You also have the table on the right-hand side where you can filter for the location or the date of loss. So pretty cool at all. But that's not all. I would also like to show you, because we are talking about the digitization of our supply chain. Normally you start with planning a supply chain, but what does in reality really looks like? So this is a really good question. And I would like to show you that sometimes there are some exceptions in the supply chain, and with this technology you can have it right away and can see it. So also in that case I just choose my asset. I want to have transparency on the supply chain, and I just downsize a little bit the date. And in that case, I see over here that there is an exception, because the normal process says that from Switzerland, our assets have to go right away to our supplier. But in 28 numbers, there was an exception. I don't know why these assets went from Switzerland to our hub in Stuttgart, but it doesn't went directly to our supplier. So this is pretty cool to see, and see on live data that there are exceptions. And if this is not enough for you, you also have the chance to work with direct exports. So you can download all the relevant and generated data from the cloud and do your own reports, work with your own asset analytics. So this is pretty cool too. So this is just for now with the live demo. I would like to hand over to Jutta, and she will summarize all you've heard by now.
Thanks, Marcus. And as promised before, I do not need to explain you the technology. The technology gets explained by our customers, and they make benefits out of the technology, and they should explain you what are the benefits of the technology. What I can tell you in the end of the day is, I think Marcus has already done a bringing transparency into end-to-end supply chains as a vehicle to bring the transparency into the supply chain. But what he mentioned as well are some very, very important points to be successful with such projects, as mentioned by Max at the beginning. You not only need to know or gain in the end of the day, but you need as well to follow some steps, and you need to set up some structural team organizational point of views which are important for your success in your project. So one is, as here in the Trump example, one key point of contact. Markus says always Spock. So this is important that you have this one person in your company. This person does not need to do everything, but he or she needs to be the person in charge who knows what to do and where to get in when it is not running as expected. Second thing, I always come back to my point with pain and gain. So you need to understand your problem. If you don't understand the problem and the process behind the problem, the end-to-end visibility will not grow up because you don't know your problem at all. Coming to the point number 3, turn participants into partners. You will not win such projects as a one-man, one-woman show. You will just win these projects in teams. And I can tell you, based on 15 years experience in logistics projects, this is really keen that you never will win such projects with one person in a company. With it aside, with the actual situation on Corona, it's not always easy, but following you will have the chance, I'm sure, you go once to the locations you are looking after, because everybody who is working with a logistics experience that when he is once at a site, he has a feeling and he gets a better understanding about the processes, and he can afterwards take whatever he's or she has seen there into consideration and brings this into the project. So never miss that point. Install the hardware. Easy to install. I have shown you how easy it is. Markus has as well shown you. Just take the gateway, use the magnets, plug to any IT projects for that. Install the hardware somewhere at the trailers. As mentioned by Markus, forwarders can as well add gateway with solar panels so that they get charged fully autonomously. So this is as well no problem. Then train the people on how to use it. And this is a very important point in regard to project management. A lot of people are running a project, but they miss in the end of the day the user. If the user is not familiar with the program and the user is not familiar with the data, he will not support you in the project, and he will not bring you the value add you have calculated in your project. So don't underestimate the training in this case. Keep working with the data. The data are the gold of the future, but you only will grab the gold if you work with the data. So a lot of theory, a lot of practice. And the last, I just look on the clock. It's 45 minutes now gone. And as mentioned by Max at the beginning, we would like to show you now, or we would like to start now with you, a Q&A session. So please feel free to enter now all your questions, if you haven't done that already, into the Q&A section. We have in the background some people who are looking after the questions you are handing in. We do know our utmost to answer all of your questions. If there are some more questions we can't answer within time frame of 15 minutes now, we make sure that one of us will come back to you later after this training session to give you the final answer. And never underestimate, talk to us is as well always very cool. So we have here a lot of options technically that you can make an appointment with us. Max will come afterwards again to this point, but don't underestimate contacting us, talking to us. We are always open to answer as well all your questions after this webinar. And now I'm handing over back to Max, of the hosts of today, as he will lead you through the questions, and might be that I will come back with some or the other answer afterwards.
Thank you very much, Jutta, as well as thank you very much, Markus, for that really comprehensive overview. And I already heard from our team in the backlog that we have a lot of questions here. So we will give our very best to go through. And as you can see, we already see the first question which was handed in. So I would lead through that question. Question was, how do you deal with white spots when there is no coverage in remote areas? And I think this is something maybe Jutta, you can cover from a product point of view and give us your advice or your thoughts about that.
Thanks for handing the question over to me, but the person in charge who has written down the question, I think he should or she should give me afterwards an email or a call, because I don't understand 100% the question right now. But what I can tell you is we are dealing with 2G, MB-IoT and CAT-M1. So these remote areas or not tracking areas are really on a minimum